today's topic, what goes into successful large-scale Wi-Fi. Every now and then it's good to, for me at least, just to kind of recenter on what we're even trying to do when we get into, the business of Wi-Fi networks, especially the large-scale ones. So easy to get lost in dashboards and tools and hype and marketing that we kind of forget what we're really trying to accomplish. So that's kind of a little bit of where we're coming from, and you'll see that come out during the discussion. About me, all you need to know is I'm dreamy. The Duluth News Tribune never said it, but I hope that someday they do. So, what goes into successful large-scale Wi-Fi? And again, as I get into this topic or any topic, I just want to remind you that, I am a CWNE. I'm a certified wireless network expert. I don't know everything. I've got 26 years of Wi-Fi experience, and I still don't know everything. When I offer my opinion, when I offer my perspective, it's just that. It's mine. Yours may vary, and that's A-okay. I'm just letting you know where I am coming from. And where I'm coming from ends up being a combination of everything I've learned from the theoretical and then also from my real world practical. So if any one of you were to do this, you would have your own take on the topic. But hopefully my take does give you some stuff to think about and maybe ring some bells and maybe get you thinking about at least a few things that you hadn't thought about before, or maybe didn't give them enough weight in your thoughts. But anyhow, what goes into successful large-scale Wi-Fi? The hint. It does take a lot more than super expensive access points. I don't care what the brand is. I get a little tired of hearing people say, you can't go wrong with vendor X. Actually, you can. You can really go wrong with vendor X or Y or Z. If you don't do things right, if you don't implement right, if you don't approach things right, the APs are just building blocks. Doesn't matter what the logo is on them. Some systems are easier to use than others. Some are more reliable than others. But if you do the important upfront things, you're just going to have that much better of a chance for success. I just love that cat and these crazy ladies. I just find myself wanting to do more and more with this foolish meme. But, in this case, the Wi-Fi sucks. So a lot of times when the Wi-Fi sucks, the Wi-Fi is a product of somebody's approach. And usually the Wi-Fi doesn't want to suck. It's just at the mercy of the approach that built it. And that's what we're going to talk about, how to make sure that eventually the ladies on the left smile and the cat can just enjoy his vegetables. So, even though there are vast differences across, different business environments, different business wireless and network environments, there are certainly common fundamentals, right? And to me, I kind of approach this a little bit like a military analogy. I was in the military for quite a while. So much planning goes into, missions, and whether you're talking about, doesn't matter what branch you're talking about, before things are executed and before people go out and do things other than the routine daily tasks, a lot of planning goes into it. A lot of thought goes into, getting things right. A lot of, uh-oh. Are you still with me, Heather?
Yep. You're back.
Okay.
You're back on your slides.
Okay. Not sure what happened there. I heard a blip. So basically, I don't know what got cut out and what didn't, but basically, things don't just happen successfully. You have to plan. You have to build up for them. You have to consider, the right inputs before you can get good outputs. And again, that's a sneak peek of where we're going. So again, these are just examples. This is not obviously a comprehensive how-to for big wireless, because we just don't have time for that, and that could fill books, and it has filled books from various vendors and various authors. But when we boil it down to some of the more critical elements, before you actually roll out your Wi-Fi. And when I say large-scale Wi-Fi, I guess I should quickly define that. To me, large-scale Wi-Fi, you're on a campus, you're on a big business um, complex. You're not just talking handfuls of APs or maybe even dozens of APs. You're talking hundreds and thousands. That's where I'm coming from loosely when I say large scale wireless. And then in there, you're going to have different user groups. Usually, you're going to have different client device types. You're going to have perhaps different needs for different constituents that are all in the same environment. So we're talking about large numbers of access points, large numbers of clients, and a lot of diversity of need and want out of the network. So before you roll things out, the notion of operational goals, both general and discrete. Well, this is what we want it to work good. Well, it's a general goal. And then there's going to be a lot more discrete goals that you want out of the network as well. The organizational policies I'm going to talk about specifically in a little bit. But the reason I say that you really need to be endorsed by the C-levels, in case I forget to mention it later, so easy to put down a policy on paper and then have it never be followed, have it never be enforceable, have it be the most eloquent thing ever written, but if nobody is giving you authority to enforce it, or nobody really cares about it, it's just not going to serve any purpose whatsoever. So I'm talking about real policy that has been not just written and input from all the important people, but it's also been endorsed by the people who have the authority to give you the authority to then enforce that policy and bring it to life. And just, that is kind of an important thing to me. So I want to get it out there. The notion of client device expectations, and I promise I'm not going to read every bullet. You guys can read the bullets while I'm talking here. But this one, in every wireless, CWNA or whatever, you have to know the clients that are going to be on your wireless network. I kind of chuckle at that, even though that is like an edict in all of the learning that goes on for becoming a wireless professional. Yeah, good luck with that. I mean, how many of us can foresee the various clients that are going to hit our wireless networks over the life cycle of one rollout? APs last 5, 7, 10 years, depending on the scenario. How many different client devices are going to come and go in that time? So yeah, know your clients the best that you can, and know that things are going to change. It's important to give it some thought, but the notion of it's only ever going to be the iPhone 14 and blah blah blah. I mean, to me, that's just really, really hard to lock onto beyond perhaps port operations or retail environments with particular scanners that last for 20 years. But I think those are really the exception when it comes to knowing your client devices. The rest of them from this list, I'm going to call out a handful and explore them a little more deeply. But the bottom line is you got to think about things before you move right to deployment. Or you just go buy a bunch of stuff and figure it out as you go, and that doesn't usually turn out very well, or it's never really done, or your users never really know what they can and can't and should do, or how to report trouble or whatever. But boy, you go down this road and the salespeople are going to love you because you're constantly going to be tinkering. You're constantly going to be adjusting. You're going to be at the mercy of people, trying to sparkly eye you to get more of your budget dollars, just, based off of your own irresponsibility. You just don't want to do this. So back to what we do want to do. So let's look at some of the underpinnings of good large-scale Wi-Fi. So I mentioned policy before. What does that have to do with good Wi-Fi? And again, we're talking real policy, as I mentioned before. Your policy drives solutions. It drives your daily operations, right? So, one example of a policy for wireless under the heading of wireless, I I might want in my organization, my staff needs to authenticate with 802.1x. We're only going to use managed clients like Active Directory type managed. We're going to use WPA3 for encryption, and we're going to use TLS in our EAP type. Right? That's kind of an operational policy. That's what we're going to do. That lets you build a solution, or at least get the elements, various elements went into what I just say, but it gives you targets to aim for. These are the things that we know we're going to need to achieve. Then maybe another policy element in that same scenario, maybe your guests need to provide a phone number and they need to acknowledge terms of service before they're allowed on the network. So for that to happen, maybe there's a captive portal, not to start the religious debate about whether there should ever be a captive portal. This is not the venue for that discussion, but just giving that as an example of policy when it comes to wireless, that helps you translate what you want out of what you expect and need to get out of the network. It helps you translate it to solutions when it's time to go solution shopping. So if you're shopping for something that can't help you achieve your policies, you probably got to look at a different solution. Another underpinning of good large scale wireless. What I'm calling required integrations. Boy, this can burn you in a big way if you don't really think about how is what we're trying to do going to fit in with the rest of the environment, right? Especially nowadays with what I'm calling new solutions, AI this and cloud that. I'm using the old stuff. I'm using the new stuff. I've been kind of shocked by a couple of things, put into play one solution. Never even crossed my mind that it's not going to do syslog. I knew it wouldn't do SNMP because it's basically out there cloud managed, but no syslog. Well, you don't get syslog. You got to use webhooks. I don't want to use webhooks. I want my syslog. Well, this is what we do. I didn't consider the required integration. That syslog is really a big thing generally for me. So webhooks, I know they're very powerful, but if that's not what you're set up for and you didn't see it coming, it can be a bit of a shocker. So I kind of didn't do my own advice, and I didn't consider the required integrations in that particular point. As we get into cloud management, there can be tension. So many things these days. Every vendor has a cloud managed offering. A lot of times you got to break your own security policy or adjust your security policy or build an exception, whatever, to let the things that need to talk to the cloud. You just have to consider all of this stuff that's coming. Beyond the shockers, everybody tends to have authentication concerns, perhaps guest access. If you're running an AD environment, and I mention it because they're just so prevalent, ubiquitous, you're monitoring your alerting systems. Again, like I said at the beginning of the discussion on this slide, how is your new wireless large scale environment going to fit in with all of the rest of the parts of your environment? You really got to give it some thought, and ideally the surprises would be minimized at the end of it because you've really put the thought into it that's going to help you be successful up front. The notion of operational goals, what do you need out of it beyond just reliable client access? Sometimes that gets lost in the mix. We want so many crazy, fancy things that we forget that people need reliability. Everybody wants reliable client access, but it's easy to forget about it. So you do all this other crazy stuff and reliability kind of goes out the window. Well, reliability is a given. That is an operational goal. We want reliable client access. And then when you get into the other things, what's really important to you? And again, these bullets are, kind of shockers that I ran into, transitioning from one system to another. I got kind of spoiled with one vendor's approach to telling you, pretty important details to me about rogues. Well, the new vendor doesn't call it a rogue; they call it a neighbor. And oh, by the way, we're not going to show you all the stuff that you relied on in your old system that you uh, use to actually go track down rogues. To me, it was a pretty big thing, and I was shocked, and I didn't do my homework and learn enough about it, and it came back and bit me. Another situation, particular SSID mapped to a pool of VLANs, and then also needed to use a radius attribute for a certain client type to send it off to its own VLAN. Um, Again, so used to doing it in the old system, I assumed that all systems did it. Got to be common. The new one didn't, and that was a pretty important integration to me. Now, to the vendor's credit, the new vendor, they heard my cries and they eventually worked with it, and that was good. Yet another vendor. Again, the assumption was, uh, everybody's doing the transition mode with WPA3. I don't have to come up with a 6 gig specific SSID, and I could use transition mode. Well, one of the leading cloud managed vendors still hasn't delivered that, and that's hurting me in certain locations. So, the operational goals, the things that I need. Yeah, if I had only documented my own needs a little bit better, none of these things would have come back and bitten me, because I may not have gone down the road of getting into those solutions if my operational goals, the examples I'm given, if they were that important to me, they might have been deal breakers. And I, kind of, again, did not take my own advice here. And now I'm dealing with the fallout and trying to beg the vendor into giving me the things that I think I need, or explain to me why I really don't need them. And those are not unpleasant, or those are not pleasant conversations at a lot of points when you get into it. Wireless design, another one of the more critical underpinnings. Um, what's the big deal about it? It should be obvious, but it often isn't, right? Every large scale wireless environment is going to need not just design, but design from people who actually know how to design big networks. Again, should be obvious, but a lot of times it's blasted right past. We'll let the electrician do it. We'll let the architect do it. We'll let the AV people, somebody who has no qualifications whatsoever, but they're already working on the floor plan. So let's just let them plot out yet another device set. That's just not good. Yesterday's design, if you're upgrading an old network to new hardware, yesterday's design very well may work, and it might not. And when I say the design, basically, where are your cabling locations? Where were the old APs out at the end of a Cat 6, hopefully a Cat 6, or at least a Cat 5e, or hopefully a decent cable that was certified and tested. Um, can you reuse those points? A lot of times you can. And a lot of times it's not going to be enough, or things need to change. But again, only people who really know what they're doing are going to be able to qualify that. And if you don't qualify that, it's just one more time bomb waiting to come back and bite you and undermine the notion of good wireless at scale. I see a lot of times, I'll see it in RFPs, I'll hear it in conversation. You got to use a specific design tool, as if using that design tool, the fact that you're using it is going to automatically give you good wireless. Well, if you put that design tool in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing with it, or somebody who really doesn't care, or somebody who knows how to use it a little too well, and they know how to do all the fudge sliders, the fudge sliders, so that everything is green on paper, even though it may not be green in real life when you go to use it. The tool itself, the tool doesn't have integrity. The tool doesn't have knowledge. Those all come from, it doesn't have skill. It doesn't have the ability to all by itself interpret requirements. That all comes from the professional who's using the tool. So the tool's only half the story. You can take away the tool, let somebody who really knows what they're doing use no tool whatsoever, and the network is going to come out better than putting that fancy tool in the hands of somebody who really doesn't know what they're going to do. And I will stand by that statement. And then good design changes in relation to overall requirements. Yesterday's network might have been used in a specific way, and all of a sudden there's a new requirement. That requirement might undermine what you're trying to do. It may not mesh with the old design, and that might require an adjustment to your design. And as the networks get bigger, these effects are just felt more strongly, and it gets more expensive to try to claw your way out of something that might have got missed that was very important early on. Effective monitoring. When you monitor something, when you monitor a network, you monitor wireless or a LAN, day to day, you're taking the temperature of the network. You're taking the temperature of a certain part of the network. You're getting a sense of, are people happy? Is the network generally healthy? Monitoring tells the very important story of what's going on in the environment. Good monitoring tells a truthful story. Bad monitoring can lead to a lot of bad conclusions. It can lead to false sense of security, false sense of the sky is falling. That notion of effective monitoring, you really got to think about that before you get into your wireless, whether it's a new wireless system or you're changing vendors. Some systems, for example, might make assumptions about the way you've rolled out your DHCP and DNS, especially if you're using multiple servers and you're doing anycast and things like that. You're going to end up with a dashboard full of red, full of false alarms. And if you show that to the help desk, my God, the network sucks. The sky is falling. We better roll trucks. We better do all kinds of stuff. They're just red dots because the monitoring system made assumptions about the way your critical core services are. That can be pretty frustrating. So you got to make sure that the monitoring system that you're getting into, if it's natively part of the wireless system, if it can make sense of your environment in a sensible way. It's interesting as we get more into cloud management, I'm learning that a lot of times if a single access point is out or a single, another component that's part of the wireless network, if it's quote unquote out, does that mean it's not connected to the LAN or it just can't talk to the cloud? You're going to get the same indication either way in a cloud dashboard. And it becomes an interesting thing to think about. In days of old, if an AP was out, it probably went offline. It's not on the network. Nowadays, it may very well be on the network, but it just can't talk to the cloud. Again, just one of those interesting little things that's a kind of an indicator of where we are with the evolution of wireless. Another thing I'm learning right now is the notion of timestamps, especially with some of the newer systems. Part of it is the cloud. You don't have SNMP anymore on some of these systems. Real time isn't so real. There's a little bit of lag of everything getting put up to the cloud. And then in other cases, certain systems, the vendor will show you what's going on with a specific thing in the last hour, last 5 minutes. You can't get any more discrete. And to me, it's a little bit maddening. You don't have the native tools can't give you the timestamps perhaps so well. If that's really important to you, it might not be the solution you want to look at. So it's really hard to pick apart these things that you're used to or that you expect or that you assume, but it's important to give it a lot of thought. I need to know about, do I have a rogue in this environment right now? Well, I can't tell you that. I can tell you what's there in the last hour. It may not be good enough depending on the environment. So understanding what the system can give you versus what you need and how you might supplement, if you can even supplement what they can give you with some other monitoring tool. This is all really important stuff to think about for a big network, for a big critical network. And then this whole new generation, APIs have been with us for a long time, but arguably they're getting leaned on more and more and more. API and webhooks versus what's in the GUI and what you're used to in SNMP. If you're not ready to do the API and the webhook thing whole hog, but the vendor overemphasizes the need to use them, it may not be a good fit versus what you're used to with SNMP and syslog and what you might want to get out of a GUI. And then, like I said, down there in the bottom, this to me, this is very important because there shouldn't be any or very little unknown or mystery, right? There should be no gaps in how you see your own network. If you're going to deliver a network that you can stand behind, you got to be able to tell what it's doing every step of the way. That is getting a little bit weird with some of the newer systems, in my opinion. So again, we didn't cover everything from the early slide that listed out all kinds of stuff you need to think about up front, but I did want to call out some of the more important ones. When you boil it all down, we are talking about requirements, right? That's nothing new. They've always been important. But when it comes to large scale Wi-Fi, super, super important. That notion of requirements, you don't want to just blow past. You don't want to make assumptions. You don't want to take the notion of requirements that were important 10 years ago and now we're making changes. We'll just dust off that document and change the date. That's the wrong approach. Other than requirements, designed by professional qualified people is absolutely critical. And then the ongoing monitoring that really works and it's effective and it isn't just a dashboard full of false alarms or gaps in what's really happening. None of this is new, but like I say, at scale and with the huge increase in wireless clients and the huge increase in reliability of the wireless network, this stuff has never been more important. Same old paradigm. There's nothing new under the wireless sun, I'm finding, generally, other than product sets. The requirements, the fuzzy stuff going on behind the scene that in the end of the day is super important. That hasn't changed. On top of that, you need to be able to give the users an effective way to report problems, right? Again, if you want your network to run well and you want people to feel good about it, they can talk to you, you can talk to them. You can propagate, hey, we've got something down over in this building. Don't freak out, we're working on it. That sort of thing, it needs to be a two-way street on the notion of communicating problems. Reputational management. I'm dealing right now with an SMS service that is making us potentially look like absolute buffoons the way we're doing our guest wireless. And that is because of this just horrific behavior of this SMS management company. I will not own their bag of crap. I'm telling everybody far and wide, this is what's going on with the problem. Our wireless is fine. It's this back-end integration. And here's the specifics of what they're not doing and what we're trying to do about it. That sort of thing is super important. Knowing that wireless, Wi-Fi kind of wireless, may not be the best technology for a given application. Everybody wants to put stuff on Wi-Fi because you have Wi-Fi. It's there. It's easy to leverage. Not everything is the best fit for Wi-Fi. There's all kinds of sensors that are way better off on LoRaWAN. There's all kinds of stuff that's perhaps better off on 5G. Your overall setup just might not be good for specific types of casting and multicast and all of this. Just because wireless is there doesn't mean everything that can use Wi-Fi should be on it. You can say no, and sometimes saying no makes the network that much better because these oddball things aren't dragging it down and crippling it and causing more problems. But if you're going to be the person saying no, my advice is you better have an alternative to offer as you say no. And then finally, this is where I close it. Kind of done with the beginning of kind of done with the gist of, the important stuff that goes into, getting your large scale wireless right. But in this day and age, 6E in and of itself doesn't fix much, at least not yet, right? The marketing stuff. Depending on what you read, 6E solves all your problems. It doesn't. You still have to implement it right. There's not all that many clients yet. They're coming. But 6E poorly implemented is poorly implemented Wi-Fi. Same with AI, right? Oh, we got AI. Okay, that doesn't make anything automatically good. It might be implemented poorly. It might be done by developers who have no idea what it takes to actually run a wireless network. AI is a building block, just like APs are a building block. And if they're implemented poorly, you've gained nothing, right? A lot of times I'm seeing that the cutting edge new stuff takes the stance that anything from the old way of doing wireless is bad. It's all got to go. Everything has to be redrawn and redone. And a lot of times, what was important is just thrown out. And we're going to start over from scratch. And because we've got AI, that makes us wonderful. No, not everything that was old was bad. A lot of it was, but not everything. And you might want to just not be in a hurry to just discard everything from days gone by. We still need some stuff like syslog. Um, to me, we're very much in the age of Ferrari pricing for GMC grade solutions. GMC is not bad, right? But at the same time, you shouldn't have to pay pay more for what you're actually getting, as I trip on my words here. And that's where we are. These things cost a king's ransom anymore, today's wireless solutions. We're looking at APs that are way north of $1,000 a piece, list price. Even more important to get it right before you buy into these large scale solutions, because the costs add up really, really quick. And the last bullet there, if you don't do all the required planning and the discrete defining of requirements, the bigger your network, the harder the regret is going to be. And with that, but that brings us to the end.
All right. Well, let's do some Q&A for you. So first one we've got is from Forrest. So a little bit of context here. APs are powered 24/7, 365. There are about 100 RJ45 finger and punch down connections in the cable from the switch to the AP. An initially poor connection may pass the install test, but fail as corrosion grows due to constant current. In what ways do APs degrade in performance, if at all, before the DC voltage cannot be maintained at the AP and they go down or indicate insufficient power? It's a lot of words.
Oochie mama, there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Very well written. Good for you for getting all of that in. I know that dealing with some of the newer APs like 6E, exactly. If 6E, you've got the hard fails. It's either up or it's down. It can't get power to work. It's the power is so screwed up, whether you're negotiating LLDP or CDP, it's just not going to come on. I mean, that's the obvious. You got a problem. Whether it's a problem with power out of the switch or whether it's a problem with the cable, as described, not delivering the power because it's lost its integrity, whatever. There's that, and then you've got, okay, this thing was running full power, pulling down 60 watts is being delivered out of the switch. I need 31 at the AP. And it used to do that, and suddenly the AP isn't doing 4x4, it's only doing 2x2. And hopefully something in our monitoring system says, hey, you're only doing 2x2. You've got insufficient power for what you were trying to do with 4x4. That's kind of a not hard failure, but it could be an indication that the AP or that the wire just can't deliver what it's supposed to get you fully operational for what the switch and the AP should be capable of, but that thing in the middle just can't do the job. So beyond those scenarios, trying to think on my feet, I don't have much to offer short of going out and periodically testing your cables to know that things are degrading. Operationally, there's not a lot of middle ground if the cable is kind of weirdly failing.
All right, we got one more for you, and then I actually have one that's kind of for Eric. An anonymous attendee, I'm guessing because this is kind of a bit of tea and shade at us. Can you elaborate on how a monitoring platform may not be able to handle all of your DHCP DNS setup?
Sure. So I'll try to get it right, not being our DHCP administrator, but working with them closely. So we have redundant DHCP servers, and the client goes out and requests DHCP. One of the servers answers, but the client asks both of them. One answers, the other one knows that the first one answered, so it doesn't answer. Or the client accepted one, even though they both do answer. The monitoring system says, oh my God, he asked for one. It was offered, but he didn't take it. Well, he's already taken one, and that's perfectly legitimate. But the monitoring system says because you asked for two, or you asked two servers for an address, one of them answered before the other one did, or the other one didn't because it knows that the first one did. It sees an unanswered request falsely. I know that wasn't eloquent at all, but I'm trying, and it's hard to talk and talk and talk and talk and keep your thoughts lined up. But that is a situation that we're actually seeing now, even if I'm not verbalizing it all that great. So we're seeing a lot of reports of a totally fine client didn't get a DHCP address, even though it did, because of the multiple servers in use.
Awesome. All right, let's take this last one from Larry. First of all, thanking you for the great presentation. And then, so it sounds like Larry is the beginner learning 802.11 WLAN features and asking for some recommendations on resources, books, and YouTube channels that they can refer to.
My first go-to for everything is CWNA from CWNP. It is the most comprehensive, and I think it's at the right level for both beginners and experts. And as you transition from being a beginner to an expert, that book that you go back to and revisit will help you not only get started, but will within the pages of that book, it'll help you to take your game to the next level. But you have to bring yourself back to it on occasion. That is my absolute recommendation. I get nothing from CWNP for it. I just think it's a really good book that has developed well and stood the test of time in its various reiterations. Beyond that, I would defer to Seven Signal because you guys are in that game of providing that kind of knowledge. So I'll shut up and let maybe Eric have a say.
Yeah, and to be fair, Larry in his question says, in addition to these webinars. So of course, these webinars are always going to be free, always going to be available to be accessed. Quick follow-up. Do I need to finish CCNA to go over to CWNA, or can I go directly to CWNA?
Yeah. CCNA is Cisco specific. CWNA is vendor neutral. So you absolutely don't have to do anything, any one vendor's anything before you go to CWNA. And again, I'm not throwing stones at Cisco in any way, shape, or form. It's the same thing with Juniper. You don't need to do any Juniper before you go to CWNA. You don't need to do any Aruba before you go to CWNA. CWNA is vendor neutral. My recommendation would be to do that before you do anything vendor specific, because that would help you learn, the vendor neutral approach. And then, okay, this is how this particular vendor implements that, which I learned from a vendor neutral perspective. So every vendor has to implement what's in CWNA somehow, but they're all going to do it a little bit differently, if that makes any sense.
Definitely. I like Andrew's comment. The only issue with the CWNA book is the helicopter required to transport it.
It is a big book and it's getting bigger. And I like to razz David and David about it. Pretty soon you're going to need a pallet jack just to get it in your house when they deliver the next version.
It's all that good, juicy content.
Yep.